That's a very complex question. Doesn't allow your body to heal, grow, and thrive.
How can people communicate genuine care in such a dysfunctional environment? And this applies in society. A lot of lonely people, a lot of hurt people.
Common thread is trauma. As human beings, that's really all we need to grow and thrive.
Those two people. Saved my life. Welcome to the Sigma Empath podcast. I'm your host, Vital Germain. Our guest on this episode is...
My name is Monique Harris. I'm a licensed clinical social worker that has developed or created a trauma treatment center geared towards children and families. We work with all things trauma and trauma-related issues by providing multiple modalities that specializes in trauma treatment.
Wow, I love that. And by the way, we've known each other for a while. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I want to dive in with a statistic that I researched about children in foster care.
Okay.
2001 survey shows that 391,000 children lived in foster care and the majority of them, surprisingly, despite stereotypes of single parents, fatherless homes, the majority of these children are white. But from your learning experience, what's the main cause that this number of children in foster care is so high?
Well, that's a good question. A very good question. Based on my experience in the field, it has been substance abuse related as well as mental health related. I think those are the biggest things that lead them into the foster care system. And then once they're in, it's very difficult to get out.
Can you describe the foster care system? I was raised in the English foster care system. I'm not sure if it's the same.
Okay.
I lived in group homes, but there was also the option of getting adopted into a foster care family. So can you explain the broad picture of what foster care means and what it looks like for children?
Okay, first, I didn't know that about you, Vital, so just learned something new. But the foster care system in America is, we have layers of foster care treatment because of a child's behavior or developmental level. And so originally, a person may get a call or the police may come out and they need to call a social worker to come to the site or location to pick up a child or determine whether that child is safe. So there's a couple of different doors that they can enter into the system. Generally, once they've been deemed to need to go into the system, they're taken to, in Las Vegas, they're generally taken to what we call Child Haven, which is kind of like an orphanage that has different pods with kids that are at different levels, age groups, or developmental or medical challenges. So they're kind of separated, where it's a group environment until they're able to find a home suitable to foster them.
So that is to get them into a family environment. That is the objective.
The objective here is to get them into a family environment, yes. Group homes is usually the next level when we run into kiddos that have some issues. They may not do well in single families. They may do better in structured environments, whether it's behavioral wise or medical wise or developmental wise. And so group homes is generally there's another layer for children who need out-of-home placement because their mental health is so severe. Then they may go into an institution-like environment.
So I've done a little bit of research. You're sort of an expert. You've been doing this for a long time. Some of the repercussions, some of the consequences of children growing up in these environments is a series of mental health issues, ADHD, low self-esteem. You mentioned drug addiction. Is that all based on this, I guess, highly negative? Is it literally that is the simple cause? They lack love, they lack affection?
So that's a very complex question, and there isn't a black and white answer to it. The only thing that I've seen that's a common thread is trauma. And so the things that you described or the symptoms that you described are symptoms of people who have experienced trauma. And so trauma, which diagnostically we call PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, is those are symptoms that can be related to PTSD. So people experience extreme moods, right? I'm sad. I have I'm used to, or I live in this constant fearful state because I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. Um, I come from a state where abuse may have been the cause of me entering into this system where I've been snatched away from everything that I know and love. And now I'm being dropped into this other environment where I don't quite know how to act. I don't know what the expectations are of me. If I'm lucky, I get into a loving home where expectations are clear, structured, nurturing, and then I grow and thrive because as human beings, that's really all we need to grow and thrive. But if I'm thrown into a toxic environment where I'm with a relative of the person who's abused me or who's caused me to enter into a system, usually the systems are alike. Just one is a little less severe than the other. And so, again, if I'm in a toxic environment, of course, I'm going to be hyper vigilant. I'm going to be on the lookout all the time. I'm going to be in a constant state of fear. So all of these things on your body doesn't allow your body to heal, grow, and thrive because the environment is not allowing the body to heal itself from the last experience.
Yeah.
And so compounded, you have another generation of the last generation, and then the cycle continues.
So this is a very romantic, naive question. I know you're doing the work to remedy the situation. If you have to sum it up in a paragraph, what is the solution? What is it that I know you provide certain programs like parent-child interaction therapy, PCIT, respite care. What's the simple version of how we fix these traumatized, damaged children, but also the parents that you mentioned perpetuate this cycle of dysfunction? What's the simple version? Is there a simple version?
I don't believe there is a simple version, which is why there's so much treatment because you really don't know what each person needs, what will hit each person, because everything hits differently, right? But the one thing, if I had to sum it up in a fairy tale explanation, it would be love, nurturing, and stability.
I agree with that. My simple version, my word is empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy for me is the neutralizer. It negates hate. It negates all these. As a child growing up in this foster care system, all I wanted was to be loved, seen, acknowledged, heard.
Exactly. We call those the 4 S's. Everyone that is a human being just desires, and everything we do is to hit the 4 S's, which is to be seen, to be safe, to be secured, and to be.
Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes, absolutely.
Does that sort of tie into that? Because that is physiological needs, psychological needs, all these things. Is it a parallel?
This one is a little bit different. This is what every human desires. Maslow hierarchy of needs kind of discuss what every human being needs before they're able to hit the next level of experience in life. And so if our basic needs are met, if the foundational needs are met, then we can go into the next level. But in all of those levels, we want the 4 S's.
And ultimately self-actualization, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
So why did you choose this profession? It has to be mentally, physically, emotionally taxing. Why?
I didn't choose it. It chose me.
Ooh.
It chose me. I have dealt with kids my entire career. Even before I became an official professional, I was working with children. I've had foster children. I've ran daycares in my home. I've raised children. I was a case manager before I went to school to get a degree to be a case manager, and they put a title on it. Um, I never had would have imagined that I would be working with mental health. Never. Circumstances line themselves up. God put things in my life that drove me into a direction to work with this population. And ultimately, it's when I have to work with. So when we were working with the children that were homeless, every one of the social ills compounds the likelihood of another social ill taking effect. And so working with that population, working with this population, that the trauma that they experience really weighs on their responses to other environments. And so if my trauma response is to act like a bull in a china shop, I'm going to tear up stuff before I even realize I've done it. And then I did it again. And now the consequences of the police are there, consequences of foster care are there, consequences of homelessness are there. All of those things in my experience has tied back to trauma and the trauma responses that we have based on our experiences.
So that, yeah, going back to my experiences in childcare, I mean, I remember being surrounded, and I was in what was considered a good home.
Okay.
I went into a very highly dysfunctional home where I was evaluated, endless psychological evaluations. And this is sort of my, not a critique, but one of the pain points that I had, and no disrespect to the work you do. As a child, there was this conflict on, even though you might care for me, this is a job for you, and I'm just a number. How do you, because I know you care, I know your journey, I know the essence of who you are, you genuinely care.
Mm-hmm.
How can people communicate genuine care in such a dysfunctional environment? And this applies in society. A lot of lonely people, a lot of hurt people. How do we show people that we genuinely care? Or how do you do it? It's your
You
job. You get a
you
paycheck.
just you just did it. You just described it. Because I care. I show I care. I've shown I care. I
But how,
sacrificed.
but how do you show these kids who were fighting the system, who were wounded, who were abandoned, who are telling themselves, I'm not good enough? Nobody gives a.
Right.
How do you show that you care? Because this is a lesson other people can learn. With the way you communicate care, maybe other people can empower, inspire a
Okay.
child to not go down a negative path.
Okay. So communication, in my opinion, is always key, right? One action speaks louder than any words. We all know that. When you pair that with the explanation, which is why I have leaned so heavily into mental health, right? Because I've seen these trauma wounds. I have experienced these kiddos with that belief or that feeling. But when you see someone, as the kids say, go hard in the paint for you, when you see someone show up every time you need them, when you hear someone say, I don't care what you do, I'm still going to love you. I might be mad at you, you may be mad at me, but I'm going to still love you. Come here and hug me. When you hear that, you feel that, you see that, and the actions and the communication aligns, it's a feeling that you get that you can trust that human being.
Oh, trust. That was one of the things, and I still have adult scars of a lack of trust because every adult let me down, and it's really
Right.
hard to remove that psychosis. Can you get into some of the things that your platform, your company, your organization provides? Again, you talk about parent-child interaction therapy. What is that?
So that is a treatment modality that works with children that have severe behavior problems, and parents are unable to regulate them or keep them under control, for the lack of a better term. It's a modality where a therapist sits behind a two-way mirror. The parent sits in front of the two-way mirror with the kiddo, and they play. We call that CDI, is the first stage to it. During CDI, they strictly focus on uh, mastering a set of skills that we call pride skills. And that's praise,
Praise, reflect,
reflect.
imitate, describe, and enjoy.
While they're implementing those skills, they're developing bonding and nurturing. And the focus is strictly on the child, and the child gets to play with an identified toy, so specific toys that aren't violent, and they just interact and engage. And we're talking about now we have this child who's usually all over the place, and you're showing me that I'm the best thing since sliced bread. I have your undivided attention. Those mirror neurons are firing off because I'm looking at you. You're engaging with me emotionally. You see me. I'm safe. I'm secure. And I'm loving this. And so by the time the parent masters this, the first 5 minutes is done with the parent practicing. The second 30 minutes is done with the coach, the therapist behind the mirror, coaching the parent into seeing opportunities to engage in those pride skills. And so we're helping the parents see where and how they can get in and the things that they may have missed because life is lifing. And so I'm able to say, did you notice how excited he is about playing with you? Do you see how you have his undivided attention? He hasn't gotten up out of the chair in over 20 minutes. Then they graduate to PDI, which is parent directed interaction. And that's where the parent then starts to give commands. And in giving those commands, now we're like, oh, you want me to listen to you? I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet. and so we go through a sequence of timeout that we do consistently. There's a set of words that are phrases that are used, the actions are consistent, and the parent is being coached at how to get these reactions. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. You watch a kid who comes in is totally off the hook, won't sit down, in and out the door, standing on the chairs, walking across tables, to this child that goes, if she says this phase, if I listen, I get to continue to play. They engage with me. If I don't listen, I have to go sit in this chair.
Yeah.
Now I have choices. And I
Now,
want to.
this is something you do within your practice, but I would imagine, I don't have children. I've been a child. I'm still a child. I'm connected with my inner child constantly. But I would imagine that this philosophy, this approach to parent-child interaction, it applies across the board in families across America, surely.
Absolutely.
So
I would think so.
So again, just break down the simple version for anybody who's a parent, seen an increase in ADHD and OCD and all these isms. What's the simple 1, 2, 3 strategy that people can implement at home as an everyday parent with, I've got 7 jobs and I'm stressed and I don't have time to, what's the simple strategy that the average parent can just implement and get some type of impact?
Consistency, communication, and structure.
Consistency, communication, structure.
If I know what to expect, I can produce that. If I don't know what to expect because everything is changing from the moment to moment, then I am literally just trying to survive. If I know when I come home, this needs to be done, and there's consequences if those things aren't done. If there's consequences because they are done, consequences because they aren't done, I now get to choose. But if the consequences are not consistent, then they're not based on the behavior, they're based on the emotion of the parent.
Wow.
And how do I meet where you are emotionally? Because emotions change like waves. So I can't keep up. I can't give you what you need because you don't know what you need. You don't communicate the expectations. I can never meet them.
Wow, sounds like the average relationship I've ever held in. Unmet expectations. That applies in all aspects of life, customer service, relationships, romantic.
Exactly. Communicate the expectations. And if you're consistent with the communication and the expectation of the expectation, you get results.
Wow. I'm not done with you. I've got a few more questions, but I'm going to put it in below. Where can people find you? Your platform, What is the website so that I can put it down where people can, because so many people need the resources you're providing. Parents, children, teens, young adults.
So we are on the therapeutic solution on all the platforms.
The Therapeutic Solution on Instagram,
Yep.
TikTok, website.
Yep. TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram is what we're doing right now.
You said at the beginning, you are a
licensed clinical social worker.
A licensed clinical social worker. Mm-hmm. What's the difference? Licensed clinical social worker, therapist, psychologist. Is there a difference? Do they overlap? Are you all of the above?
No, we each kind of branch off into a specialty, if you will. So a psychologist specializes or are trained to provide testing. So that's where your IQ test, your different types of mental health testing comes in at on the clinical side, because there's different types of psychologists as well. For social workers, we're originally trained to work with the person in the systems. And so we are trained to help you navigate systems, understand systems, get your needs met in systems, case manage you and help you through the maze kind of deal. Then as you graduate with your master's, you go into a specialty. So they have a child welfare track where you can study the child welfare system. They have administrative track, which is what I took, where it's more administration, management, leadership, entrepreneurial track. And then they have other types of tracks. Once you graduate with your master's, you're then able to become a licensed independent social worker, meaning you can do all of it, whatever you want, or you specialize in clinical work, which allows you to do mental health. So I'm allowed to diagnose and treat people with mental health conditions.
Wow. On treatment, in my book, It's the Color of Empathy, I differentiate between mental health and emotional health. And here's my quick non-professional theory.
Okay.
Those who lack, these children, me as a child in foster care, I lacked emotional stability. I lacked emotional security. I wasn't, all these things. I lacked emotionally. Mm-hmm. Over time, that emotional deprivation has a mental impact, which turns to mental health. Okay. And so the way I view it is we focus too much, and I don't want to get off and start preaching, but I believe we focus too much on the mental health aspect in terms of medication.
Okay.
And we don't address, and I believe that you are actually addressing with some of the work you do, you are addressing the emotional aspects of these children.
Yes.
Why have you chosen that route rather than the more common pharmaceutical, give them a pill, give them more medication? Why have you been very clear to choose this emotional part of the journey?
Because I believe if they're present, every human being wants to be the best human being they can be. And if I'm medicated, how long is that sustainable for? Right? I believe I'm not a disbeliever in medication.
No, it brings
but I'm a believer that our body has everything it needs. Our body is designed to generate everything that it needs. And so if given the time and space through treatment, in my belief, our body will heal itself. It will produce. We will learn different things. We'll learn our emotions and things that trigger our emotions and how to deal with those things in a healthy way across the board. And so I never deter my clients from medication. I say, let's work with the medication so we can come off the medication.
I love that, work with the medication.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. I love that concept. In closing, you mentioned earlier on, you used the word hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. My main platform, I talk about empathy, in particular the empath and the narcissist. Mm-hmm. Both experience childhood trauma for the most part. The theory of the empath is that they develop hypervigilance. we observe and we notice the most subtle nuances in communication, in breathing, and all these things. In terms of mental health, is there an understanding, is there an insight as to why some children are resilient and somehow overcome the trauma, and some children, is it get to the point, is it nurture or nature, or is it an overlap?
I think it's an overlap. And I think all people are resilient. They just develop different skills to exercise their resiliency.
Do you see, can you identify when you work with children, can you identify, I have faith in this kid, he's going to be okay, I see these resilient traits, and can you identify, oh, I'm so concerned for this child?
Absolutely. So there's some, let me say, there's some diagnosis that you are able to, it's funny you bring this up. Old school treatment used to believe that personality disorders did not evolve until after they turned 18. However, most more recent studies have explained that there are signs and traits throughout a person's lifespan, or whenever these things happen or come up for them. So because everything is on a spectrum, there isn't a black or white. There isn't a, it's done this way, and then there is no other. So there are kiddos that you run across, and as a treater, we go back and forth with whether this is an attachment issue, whether this is a trauma issue, or is this a personality issue? So does the kid who requires all the attention by any means necessary more of a narcissistic trait? Or is it an attachment challenge that they're going through periodically? Temporarily? Or is this a trauma response to it? And so in treating, which is one of the reasons that I love doing what I do the way I do it, is because it allows the time to see it, not only identify it, label it, but actually observe it and treat it, and hopefully change it if possible. But yes, there are some people, even little kiddos, that you see and you're like, I am really concerned for society with this kid.
I just want to express my gratitude to you for the work that you do. The reason why I say that is because in my childhood trauma, I had very few mentors who I felt cared, who communicated that they cared. One was a social worker.
Mm.
I was in the home, and he was actually assigned to another kid. I was good friends with that kid. We had our little group where we stuck together. We were brothers, and by default of him being a social worker to that kid would always ask, well, can they come with us? Can they come with us? And then we developed this group. He arguably saved my life just by his caring and his example. And then I had a primary school teacher who kind of took me under his wing. Those two people saved my life. You might not be aware of the lives that you are changing and impacting and saving. You may never know, because those kids may never be able to tell you. But thank you for what you do.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
And in case to lighten it up a little bit, what's the reward for you with the work that you do?
What you just demonstrated.
Monique Harris, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Same here. This was not supposed to happen, but same here, Vital. It's great seeing you again. You keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And you hang in there.
Thank you.
And call me anytime. I'm here.
I will.